Now here we are at the whiteboard and we are going to practice melody writing in preparation for your level 8 RCM exam. Now down here you can see I've written a short melodic fragment in D minor, and we are going to continue to finish the first phrase and then continue on to write a contrasting period. And I've written the staff and the notes in blue today because my black marker recently died and passed away. Very sad. So here's the steps we are going to use to complete this question. The first thing we are going to do is write the stable and unstable scale of degree where they're supposed to be at the end of each appropriate phrase. Then we are going to analyze the implied harmony of the music we were given using the 3 primary triads that we learned back in level 5. Then we are going to write the second phrase and form a contrasting period. And we will do this by extracting information from the opening melodic fragment, and we will borrow the rhythmic material and perhaps a bit of the melodic contour to inspire us to write the contrasting period. So let's get started. First thing we have to do, oh, and I almost forgot, because everybody forgets this, we finish the question by writing the phrase mark. The amount of students who I've had who have lost marks because they forgot to write the phrase mark, just like I almost did, is breathtaking. So let's start. First thing we're going to do is predict where these phrases are going to end. So we're going to write an unstable scale degree here and a stable scale degree here. So we are in D minor, and we know that unstable scale degrees include scale degree 2, 7, and 5. And I always recommend to my students that you choose scale degree 2 as your unstable scale degree. 7's okay too, but definitely not 5. Either scale degree 2, the supertonic, or 7, the leading tone, is a good option for your unstable scale degree, but I'm going to go with 2 today. And you only need 1 note in the last bar. So there's scale degree 2. And we will predict our finishing note, which is a stable scale degree, and I highly recommend you choose scale degree 1 as your finishing note of your piece. Remember, stable scale degrees, technically speaking, can be 1, 3, and 5. But I strongly recommend you use scale degree 1. Even though the textbook says you are allowed to choose 1, 3, or 5, choose scale degree 1. In fact, I recently saw an RCM exam that was marked and handed back to a student where the student had chosen scale degree 3 to finish their melody on, and the examiner docked them a point and said choose scale degree 1 instead. Choose scale degree 1, which in D minor is of course D, so I'm going to predict that my melody is going to end there on D. And it would be nice if my stems were an octave long. Okay, now the next step is to analyze the implied harmony of the melodic fragment that has already been given to us. We're in D minor. Somewhere neatly on the side of your page, you can write your 3 primary triads. We're somewhere out of the way. Let's do it down here. The 1 chord in D minor is D, F, A. The subdominant triad in D minor is G, B flat, D. And the dominant triad in D minor is A, C sharp, and E, because we're going to raise the leading tone unless we are going down. Then we will use descending melodic minor. Let's analyze the implied harmony of the opening melodic fragment. D, F, A looks a lot like the tonic triad. So the first bar's implied harmony is the tonic triad. B flat, A, and G looks I'm going to go with the 4 chord. The 4 chord is the implied harmony of the second bar. The A doesn't belong in the 4 chord, but we can label it as a passing tone. You don't have to label it, I'm just doing it for the sake of this video. Now we have to connect this music from here to here and fill in this third bar. Now you could figure out a nice rhythm that complements 3/8. I'm going to go with a quarter note, and let's see. One thing we know for sure is that we have to approach these two notes with stepwise motion. So I know the last note of this bar has to either be an F or a D. Now I'm going to go with D because I think I want 3 notes here. And in fact, it would be helpful if I decided which chord this represents. In fact, I didn't really even finish figuring out my implied harmony. The implied harmony for this last note, this E, can only be 5, obviously, and we know that we need to end this with a half cadence. So I can either choose 4 or 1 to be the implied harmony here. I'm going to go with 1. It wouldn't be bright to have the 4 chord twice. So I'm going to say 1, I'm going to go with my original plan to do a quarter note here. I'll have an 8th note here. This rhythm fits 3/8 time. This is scale degree 3, it's the mediant, it's F. This is scale degree 1, it's the tonic, it's D. This suits my implied harmony, and this works out for the opening phrase. And in fact, before I forget, I'm going to go ahead and draw that phrase mark. Your phrase mark should be immediately over the first note and end as close as you can over the last note. If I hadn't have written scale degree 2 there, it would be okay. So this is a nice melody. It's in D minor. It's extra special because it has 1 high point. That's a hallmark of good melody writing. And the implied harmony is very clear. We have the tonic triad, notes from the subdominant triad, notes from the tonic triad, and notes from the dominant triad. Now let's get to work on our second phrase. And before we start writing notes, let's figure out what the implied harmony is going to be. I already know that we have to end this piece in D minor on the 1 chord. That's obvious. Because of this, I know that this also has to end with an authentic cadence in contrast to this half cadence up here. And to make an authentic cadence, I know that the 5 chord has to appear either for this full bar or right at the end here. I'm going to try to go for the full bar since it's easier. And now I get a choice of what to do over here. I have many options. I could do 1 and 1, that would be okay. I could do 1 and 4 as the applied harmony. And that's actually pretty much all that's reasonable. 1 and 1 or 1 and 4 in this case. I'm going to go with 1 and 4 for variety's sake. So here, before I've even started writing my melody, I have my implied harmony figured out. I know I'm going to use notes from the 1 chord with some neighbor tones and passing tones if I choose, and I know this bar is going to pretty much outline the subdominant triad, and I know that these 2 chords are really important because they form our perfect cadence at the end of our phrase. Now, I'm not going to just make up any music I want. It obviously has to be in D minor, and it obviously has to be in 3/4 time, but I'm going to borrow one of these rhythmic motives. In fact, I like this rhythm, this dotted 8th with a 16th and then with another 8th. I'm going to take that, and I think I'm going to use it twice. I'm going to take this, pull it over here, make it conform to the tonic triad, and then I'm going to pull it down here and make it conform to the subdominant triad. Let's see what happens. So the tonic triad is D, F, and A. How about I take this, I'm going to start on a D, I changed my mind. That's going to be too high. I'm going to start on this D down here. I want to flip this upside down. So up here, we start on the third of the chord and we go down. So I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start on the root of the chord and go up to the third. I thought I would do it up here, but I'm worried I'm not going to have enough space to have nice stepwise motion down to the tonic. So I'm going to start much lower. So B flat was the third of the subdominant chord and it went down. I'm doing the opposite. Here's the root and I'm going to go up to the third. So I used the same rhythm and I just changed it a little bit to make it musically interesting. Now I'm going to take the same rhythm and apply it to the 4 chord. Now the 4 chord has a G, B flat, and D. A G is really, really close to this F, so I'm going to go ahead and take it. And in fact, I'm going to write this backwards pretty much. Instead of going B flat, A, G, I'm going to go G, A, B flat. And in case you're wondering, this question was not prepared in advance, so you're getting the full experience. I'm making this up as I go. So, I took this rhythm, I duplicated it, and I made it conform to the tonic triad and the subdominant triad, and I kind of did it backwards to make it more interesting. Now, I feel slightly bad because I kind of just wrote a scale. Even though it works, something in me is feeling a little bit guilty because this is basically a D minor scale going upwards. So, to make myself feel less bad, I'm going to have some sort of a jump in this bar to make it more interesting. This has to be the 5 chord. And what can we do here? We have an A, a C sharp, and an E. I can either go up to C sharp. In that case, I would have to make this a B natural to be an ascending melodic minor scale. Or I can go down to A. I think I'm going to take this rhythm and try to make it work in this bar. Now remember, we need stepwise motion between the last 2 notes, so it's probably best to do that first. This last note pretty much has to be an E or a C sharp. I bet if I have a C sharp and I go to A here, I can have a really big, interesting jump that contrasts this kind of lazy scale writing that I did. So here we go. I'm going to go with that. I took the rhythm from up here. I used the notes from the 5 chord and it fits the implied harmony. And I also did a really big jump, which complements the scalar motion I did here. In fact, I like it a lot because it jumps down farther than we even started. So, musically speaking, it's kind of like a waste of time. It's like the character climbed up a mountain to this B flat and then fell down even farther, tumbled down all the way down to the bottom. He's even lower than when he started. Obviously, his head hit the ground. He fell on his head in the C sharp, and now he's standing up. He's exactly where he started. Very sad. Very D minor, sad, journeyman, waste of time melody. I'm very happy with that. This jump covers the space of the scalar motion, and I'm going to head and write this phrase mark as close immediately above this D, the first note, and immediately above that final D there. And of course, it's a contrasting period because these 2 bars are different than those first 2 bars. So there's some melody, there's me completing a level 8 RCM melody writing question. Do you see what happened? There was a melodic fragment. The first thing I did was take care of the stuff I knew for sure. And I knew for sure the first phrase was going to end on an unstable scale degree, and I knew for sure the second phrase was going to end on a stable scale degree. So I did those first. That gives me a lot of information because the notes immediately before that have to be stepwise motion. Then after that, and this is important, I didn't just pull the melody out of the sky. I used the implied harmony to help guide my melody writing, and this is what the conservatory is trying to teach you. Okay? It's easy to look at music and think, it's easy to look at tonal music and think the composer just made up all the notes. But there is a system of chords that he kind of holds in the back of his head. In our case, it's the implied harmony. So if you do the implied harmony first and give yourself a structural harmonic outline, it's a lot easier to know what notes you used. Here's a disclaimer. If you consider yourself to be a composer or an advanced melody writer, and you want to add interesting melodic material, at this point in level 8, the conservatory will only accept passing tones and neighbor tones. There are a whole array of different non-chord tones you're allowed to use. A non-chord tone is a note that isn't contained within the implied harmony. But don't do anything extravagant. This question is not an opportunity for you to show off your artistic merit. Keep it simple. Use implied harmony, and if you want to create nice smooth motion, restrict yourself to passing tones and neighbored notes. Passing tones and neighbor tones. No échappés, no appoggiaturas, no suspensions. Keep it as simple as possible. You just want to get the marks. And of course, please remember your phrase mark. If you want to practice this and you don't have a level 8 RCM textbook at your disposal, you can go to my website classicalcontextonline, where I have, every grade has its own melody writing free worksheet that you can download, and you can practice writing both parallel periods in the earlier grades and contrasting periods in level 7 and level 8. And in level 8 particular, you have to write in minor keys. And remember, when you are writing in minor keys, to use the melodic minor scale.